where I was at with my assorted addictions, so I felt very in control of it in one hand.
Scooped him up there, took out a straw, see you dead. And I did a little line of him, yeah.
Rock and roll has always promised rebellion, freedom, and apparently a liver of steel. While some strummed guitars and changed music history, others were chugging whiskey like it was holy water. From snorting ashes to vodka marathons, the backstage of rock's golden era reads more like a cautionary tale than a dream. So buckle up. We're diving into the chaotic lives of the legends who drank like they played loud, reckless, and without an off switch. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness and questionable decisions.
One last thing, if you have any drugs or any alcohol.
Before he was a reality TV dad mumbling through breakfast, Ozzy Osbourne was the unfiltered chaos of rock and roll. He wasn't just the frontman of Black Sabbath. He was the guy who bit the head off a bat on stage and thought that was a perfectly normal Tuesday. Ozzy's affair with alcohol didn't begin in fame's glow. It started in his teenage years when the world felt heavy and booze felt light. As success exploded, so did his demons. He drank to numb the pressure, to silence the noise, and sometimes just because it was Tuesday. There was that infamous moment in Texas when he urinated on the Alamo in a blackout stupor, earning him a lifetime ban from the city. Yet beneath the madness was a man clawing his way through addiction, surviving against the odds. With the fierce love of his wife Sharon, and more than a few trips to rehab. Ozzy didn't just recover, he returned and sobered, and still somehow unmistakably Ozzy. Because in the end, even darkness can find its way back to the light, preferably with a mic in hand and a little less Jack Daniels. Keith Richards, the man who outdrank time itself. If rock and roll had a patron saint of survival, it'd be Keith Richards, preferably sculpted from cigarette ash and guitar strings. The Rolling Stones guitarist didn't just flirt with death. He practically married it, divorced it, and kept it on speed dial. Through the 1960s and 70s, Keith was less a man and more a walking pharmacy. Legend has it, he spent entire tours perpetually buzzed, yet somehow played with soul swagger and a cigarette never quite falling from his lip. He once admitted to snorting his dad's ashes mixed with cocaine. Because, well, Keith.
Scooped him up there, took out a straw, see you dead. And I did a little line of him, yeah.
But behind the myth is something rarer: resilience. Every overdose scare, every brush with the law, every morning after could have been his last, but wasn't. He didn't clean up overnight, but he slowed down, choosing guitars over chaos. At 80, he's still standing, still playing, and still defying science. If that's not inspiring, or at least impressively stubborn, we don't know what is. John Bonham, the thunder that burned too bright. They called him Bonzo, and when his drumsticks hit the kit, it sounded like thunder had joined a rock band. John Bonham didn't just play for Led Zeppelin, he powered it. His rhythms were primal, precise, and louder than a jet engine. But off stage, his volume didn't dial down. Bonham had a deep relationship with vodka, one he nurtured like a tragic romance. Stage fright, anxiety, the crushing weight of fame he drank to fight them all. Often before shows, sometimes during, always dangerously. One night the music stopped. After consuming what witnesses say was 40 shots of vodka, Bonham passed out and never woke up, choking in his sleep at Jimmy Page's house. He was just 32. His death sent shockwaves through rock. But what remains is not just a cautionary tale. It's the raw memory of a man who played with passion too big for his body, whose thunder still echoes every time those drums come crashing in. Sometimes brilliance blazes too bright to last, but oh, how it lights the sky. Vince Neil. Fast cars, hard liquor, and the weight of regret. Vince Neil wasn't just the voice of Motley Crue. He was its wild heart, wrapped in leather and chaos. He sang about girls, booze, and speed and lived every word like a dare. Off stage, the party never ended. On stage, it just got louder. But in 1984, the music stopped. Drunk behind the wheel of a sports car, Vince crashed. His friend Razzle of Hanoi Rocks died. Vince survived with a jail sentence, a broken heart, and a stain no amount of fame could wash away.
I don't need criticism. When you're singing.
He served just weeks, but the guilt stayed longer. Vince kept drinking, kept spiraling, trying to outrun what happened that night. But regret, like a hangover, always finds you in the morning. And yet there's something defiant in his survival. He's stumbled, yes, but he's also stood back up, mic in hand. Because sometimes rock stars don't shatter, they crack, they break, and somehow they keep singing. Nikki Sixx, Dancing with the Devil and Coming Back Alive. Nikki Sixx didn't just live the rock and roll lifestyle. He practically wrote the instruction manual, then overdosed on it. As Motley Crue's bassist, he was equal parts musical genius and walking caution tape, mixing heroin with vodka like it was soda and ice. His life in the 80s was a blur of backstage debauchery, near-death overdoses, and journal entries soaked in despair. In fact, The Heroin Diaries, his brutally honest memoir, reads like a horror story scored to heavy metal, bloody veins, broken mirrors, and moments of raw humanity buried beneath eyeliner and leather.
What were you on, heroin?
I was on heroin, coke, pills, alcohol.
All at once?
Yeah, all at once. White.
But Nikki didn't just survive. He came back swinging. After flatlining, yes, literally, he cleaned up, got sober, and turned his story into fuel for others. He became an advocate, a voice for the broken, and proof that even in the darkest alleyways of addiction, there's a door back to the light. Because sometimes the man who falls the hardest is the one who rises with fire in his eyes. Vince Neil. Slash, top hat. Les Paul in a liver that deserves a medal. Slash looked like a cartoon character drawn by a rock god. Towering top hat, face lost behind curls, and a Gibson Les Paul slung low like a weapon. He didn't just play guitar, he bled it. But behind that cool, slouching swagger was a man spiraling into the bottom of a Jack Daniels bottle. In the late 80s and early 90s, Slash was rarely seen without his trademark drink in hand, on stage, backstage, sometimes face down in a hotel hallway. His hands knew the fretboard better than his own memory on some nights. He once drank so much, so often, he forgot how to play his own songs mid-show.
Where I was at with my assorted addictions, so I felt very in control of it in one hand.
Alcohol wasn't alone, heroin followed, then heart failure, and one too many close calls. Doctors told him he'd die in 6 months if he didn't stop. He chose to live. And that's the twist. Slash got clean. He climbed out of the wreckage of addiction and walked back into the light with the same guitar, the same swagger, but a new kind of strength. Because redemption doesn't always wear a halo. Sometimes it wears a top hat. Billy Idol. The rebel yell that nearly broke the hotel. Billy Idol strutted into the 1980s like a sneer with a soundtrack. With his bleached spikes, leather pants, and permanently raised eyebrow, he wasn't just a rock star. He was punk's pretty boy troublemaker with a knack for catchy chaos. But Billy didn't just rebel on stage, he rebelled against gravity, sobriety, and hotel furniture. His drinking sprees were legendary. One infamous binge in a luxury hotel in Bangkok lasted 3 weeks, ended with $250,000 in damages, and required the military to escort him out. Rock and roll right. Yet beneath the smashed glass and mascara sweat was a man unraveling. The high life became hollow. The mirror once his friend started asking questions he couldn't answer, drunk. So he changed. Billy cleaned up. The rage turned into resilience. The excess gave way to endurance. And that rebel yell, still there, older, wiser, and maybe just a little less likely to punch a wall. Because even punks grow up. Some just do it with eyeliner still on. Duff McKagan, a gallon of vodka a day keeps the pancreas away or not. If Slash was the wild-haired gunslinger of Guns N' Roses, Duff McKagan was the cool blonde heartbeat pounding underneath the chaos. He looked like a surfer lost in a biker gang, but make no mistake, Duff could drink most sailors under the table, and then drink the table. At the peak of his addiction, he was downing a gallon of vodka a day. Yes, a gallon. His insides were basically a distillery. It caught up with him in 1994 when his pancreas literally exploded like a not-so-subtle memo from his body titled, "You're not invincible." Doctors told him he'd die if he had another drink. That tends to grab a man's attention. Duff quit. Cold turkey. He found sobriety in sweat, switching vodka for martial arts mountain bikes, and a lifestyle that didn't end in an ambulance. Now he's not just alive, he's thriving. A reminder that sometimes, even after setting fire to your own life, you can rise from the smoke stronger than before. Rod Stewart. Coke in a cold capsule, swagger in a suit. Rod Stewart had the voice of a gravel road, kissed by moonlight, and the party habits of a man who never read a warning label. In the 70s, with the Faces, Rod didn't just sing about wild nights. He lived them, loudly, in designer suits. But here's the twist: while most rock stars snorted cocaine like it was a competitive sport, Rod found a creative workaround. To protect his raspy golden pipes, he stuffed coke into cold capsules. Yes, the kind for sinus relief, and swallowed them like vitamins. Because who says you can't be health conscious and high? Still beneath the glam and the swagger, there was a man dancing dangerously close to the edge. He partied with royalty-romanced supermodels and staggered through years in a haze of charm and champagne. But time, like fame, eventually sobers you. Rod mellowed. He swapped out wild nights for sold-out tours and well-aged suits. His voice stayed raspy. His stories even better with age. Because legends don't always burn out, they evolve. Sometimes with a smirk and a perfectly tailored blazer. Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, the toxic twins that almost imploded Aerosmith. They weren't just bandmates, they were a walking, strutting, screaming natural disaster. Steven Tyler and Joe Perry, better known as the Toxic Twins, didn't just party hard, they turned it into an art form. If you were within 5 miles of an Aerosmith tour bus in the late 70s, chances are you got contact drunk. Steven Tyler once said he spent millions on drugs, and most of it was well spent. Joe Perry, right there beside him, trading riffs and rails night after night. On stage, they were electric. Off stage, they were a mess of slurred words, broken friendships, and hotel bills that looked like military budgets. Their substance-fueled antics didn't just shake stages, they nearly tore the band apart. By the early 80s, Aerosmith was a shadow of itself, drowning in its own decadence. But the comeback. That's where the story changes. They sobered up, reunited, rebuilt the band, and came back swinging with Walk This Way, this time walking straight. Tyler and Perry proved that even the most toxic duo can find clarity, harmony, and a second act louder than the first. Because sometimes rock bottom is just the opening act. Lemmy Kilmister. One bottle a day keeps immortality in play. Lemmy wasn't just a rock star. He was a monument etched in leather, fueled by Jack Daniels and louder than God. As the frontman of Motorhead, he growled through amps like a tank through a brick wall. His drink of choice, Jack and Coke. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. For decades, Lemmy reportedly drank a bottle of Jack Daniels every single day. Not a glass. A bottle. That paired with chain smoking and a diet that made fast food look like kale somehow didn't kill him until he was 70. And even then, death had to knock twice. His lifestyle wasn't just wild, it became myth. Fans didn't ask if Lemmy would survive the night. They asked if the night would survive Lemmy. But here's the thing, he showed up. Always. No matter how blitzed, he played with the fire of a man who meant it. And when the fire dimmed, he didn't fake it. He faced death the same way he faced a riff head-on, no apologies. Because Lemmy wasn't pretending to be immortal. He just made mortality wait its damn turn. Ace Frehley. Spaceman on stage, freefaller off it. Before he was spiraling through life, Ace Frehley was soaring across stages in silver boots, shooting smoke from his guitar like it was NASA certified. As Kiss's original spaceman, he brought swagger shred and enough makeup to terrify a department store. But Ace didn't just play like a rocket, he lived like one plummeting back to Earth. Alcohol became his co-pilot. From backstage to after parties, Ace was rarely seen without a drink, and often barely seen with one. His solos were legendary, but so were the blackouts, missed rehearsals, and public meltdowns that slowly pulled him out of orbit. Eventually, the band said enough. Ace left Kiss in the early 80s, a casualty of his own chaos. But here's where the story bends toward hope. He didn't crash. He climbed back. After years battling addiction, Ace got sober, picked up his guitar again, and reminded the world why he mattered. Because even spacemen fall. The brave ones, they suit back up and fly again. Jim Morrison, the Lizard King of Chaos. Jim Morrison didn't just sing for the Doors. He unraveled on stage in real time. With a stare that could melt glass and lyrics soaked in poetry and pain, he made madness magnetic. He was the Lizard King prophet of the counterculture, and the only guy who could turn a concert into a courtroom. Alcohol wasn't his vice, it was his muse, his monster, his microphone. He drank to feel free, then drank to feel nothing. Some nights, he delivered haunting, hypnotic performances. Other nights, he slurred poetry into the mic, while the band tried to keep the train on the tracks. And then there was Miami, where Jim allegedly exposed himself on stage and launched a media firestorm. Public indecency, arrest, chaos as usual. But beneath the wildness was a deeply haunted man, searching for meaning in a bottle, and sometimes finding only the bottom. He died in 1971, just 27 years old, in a bathtub in Paris. No autopsy, no answers. Just myths, mystery, and music that still burns decades later. Because Jim didn't just live fast, he burned like a comet, bright, beautiful, and gone too soon. Janis Joplin, Southern comfort and a soul on fire. Janis Joplin didn't sing, she ached. Every note was a scratch on the soul raw and roaring like heartbreak, set to blues. With a voice that could shatter glass or stop time, she became the queen of rock's aching heart. And in her hand, always a bottle of Southern comfort. Janis drank like she sang with abandon, with urgency, like tomorrow wasn't promised. The whiskey wasn't just a drink. It was armor, escape, and sometimes companion. She was the outsider who stormed the gates of a man's world with wild hair, no apologies, and a laugh that could crack a room wide open. But the loneliness lingered. Behind the electric stage presence was a woman aching for connection, often drowned out by the very noise that made her famous. She joined the 27 Club in 1970. Another bright light gone too soon, found alone in a hotel room with a needle and silence. Yet her voice still echoes. Not polished, not perfect, but powerful, untamed, unforgettable. Because Janis didn't come to be pretty. She came to be real, and that's what made her eternal. Ronnie Wood, rolling, rocking, and eventually recovering. Ronnie Wood never quite stood still on stage or in life. As the wiry, ever-grinning guitarist of the Rolling Stones, he danced through decades of riffs, and more riffs, all while guzzling enough alcohol to sink a tour bus. In the 70s and 80s, Ronnie wasn't sipping, he was swimming. His drinking didn't just blur nights. It blurred band relationships, studio sessions, and even stage performances. Rehab wasn't a one-time pit stop. It became a revolving door with his name on it. And yet, he was always there, guitar slung low, smile crooked, somehow holding it all together with charm and instinct, even when he was falling apart. But eventually, the music caught up to the man. In the late 2000s, Ronnie chose recovery over relapse, and this time it stuck. Today he plays with the same fire but with clearer eyes and steadier hands. He tells stories of his wildest years with a wink and a laugh, as if to say, "Yep, I made it, somehow." Because some stones don't gather moss, but they do grow up. Eric Clapton. Tears in his beer. Eric Clapton made his guitar weep, but for a while he was too drunk to hear it. One of the greatest to ever touch 6 strings, Clapton lived in the spotlight, with fingers like fire and a bottle never far behind. By the late 70s, he wasn't just drinking, he was drowning. Entire concerts blurred into blackouts. He once confessed he played the legendary Rainbow concert completely hammered. Critics called it raw. Clapton just didn't remember playing. Alcohol numbed the grief, the fame, the pressure, but it also almost took everything. In the 80s, after a series of health scares and close calls, he reached the edge. One more drink and the music might have stopped for good. But Clapton did what many rockers don't, he chose to live. He got sober, faced the silence. And out of that silence came redemption, more music, deeper lyrics, and the kind of grace that only comes from losing yourself and finding your way back. Because sometimes the blues don't break you, they rebuild you. Iggy Pop. Bleeding, brawling, and becoming. If punk had a pulse, it probably sounded like Iggy Pop crashing into a microphone. Shirtless, slathered in sweat, or sometimes peanut butter, Iggy didn't just perform, he detonated. Every show was a collision of chaos, flesh, and raw electricity. But the madness on stage mirrored the war inside. In the 70s, Iggy drank like he lived recklessly. Alcohol wasn't just a lubricant for rebellion, it was fuel for his fury. His fear, his need to feel anything. Shows spiraled into bloodied chests and broken bottles. Behind every leap into the crowd was a man falling into himself. He flirted with oblivion so often it felt like part of the act. But it wasn't. Eventually, the destruction caught up. Iggy hit bottom hard, but he clawed his way out. He sobered up. Not overnight, not neatly, but he did it. And what emerged wasn't a tamed punk, it was a wiser one, still wild but no longer bleeding just to be heard. Because true legends don't lose their edge, they just learn how to aim it. Noel Gallagher, Wonderwall of Whiskey. Noel Gallagher wasn't just the brain behind Oasis, he was its mouth, its fists, and its unapologetic ego wrapped in a parka. The man wrote anthems that defined a generation, then nearly drank himself through the decade that followed. In the 90s, Noel lived like every tabloid headline was a challenge. Boozed up before gigs, hung over during interviews, and locked in a permanent pint-fueled sibling war with his brother Liam. Their backstage brawls became as legendary as their choruses. But it wasn't just rock star indulgence, it was self-medication. Fame came fast, and with it the weight of carrying a band, a brand, and a Britpop crown he never asked for. Alcohol blurred it all until it didn't. Eventually, the hangovers hit harder than the highs. Oasis imploded, the fights went public, and Noel walked away, guitar in hand, pint glass finally set down. These days, he drinks far less and writes with more focus. Not softer, just sharper. Because even in the blurriest years, Noel Gallagher never lost the tune. He just had to turn the volume down to hear himself again. Jimi Hendrix, drowning in purple haze. Jimi Hendrix didn't play the guitar, he spoke through it. Every bend, every feedback wail was a sentence in a language only he understood. He rewrote the rules of rock with fire fuzz and fingers blessed by something cosmic. But while his music soared, Jimi himself was crashing. Alcohol wasn't his only demon, but it was always nearby, lurking in hotel rooms, dressing rooms, and the back corners of clubs. Mixed with barbiturates, it turned nights into fog memories, into static. His charm could light up a room. His rage, fueled by drink, could clear it. On stage, he was transcendent. Off stage, he was tortured, restless, isolated, and haunted by fame he didn't know how to hold. In 1970, at just 27, Jimi was found dead in a London flat. Official cause asphyxiation, but alcohol and sleeping pills had done their quiet work. His life was a solo, brilliant, improvised, heartbreakingly short. Some stars don't fade, they explode, and the sky still echoes. Bon Scott, high voltage, hard liquor. Bon Scott didn't walk into a room, he swaggered usually with a bottle in one hand and a smirk in the other. As the original voice of AC/DC, his howl was pure electricity, rough, rebellious, and impossible to ignore. But the same fire that made him unforgettable was also burning him up from the inside. Bon drank like a man who thought hangovers were a myth. Whiskey was his fuel and chaos his compass. He'd stumble off stage and into the nearest bar or car, which tragically is where his story ended. In 1980, after a heavy night of drinking, Bon passed out in a parked car and never woke up. Acute alcohol poisoning, just 33 years old. His death hit like a lightning bolt through the rock world. But in a cruel twist of timing, AC/DC's next album, Back in Black, a tribute to Bon, became one of the best-selling records of all time. Bon didn't live long, but he lived loud and left behind a roar that still rattles the bones of rock. John Lennon, the lost weekend that almost lost him. John Lennon preached peace, but his lost weekend was anything but tranquil. In the early 1970s, separated from Yoko Ono and untethered from the Beatles, Lennon spiraled into an 18-month bender through Los Angeles, equal parts rock star cliché and emotional freefall. He drank not to rebel, but to forget the pressure of being a Beatle, to forget the silence Yoko left behind. With pals like Harry Nilsson and Keith Moon, every night turned into a blurry bar crawl through infamy. Fistfights, ejections, public meltdowns. He heckled bands, got thrown out of clubs, once tried to strangle a waitress. The man who once asked the world to give peace a chance was now giving bartenders hell. But eventually, the fog cleared. John sobered up, returned to New York, reconciled with Yoko, and became a stay-at-home dad trading scotch for stroller walks in Central Park. The fire never left him, but he learned how to let it warm, not burn, because even a beetle can break. The brave ones know when it's time to come home. Brian Jones, the stone who sank. Before Mick strutted and Keith riffed, Brian Jones was the Rolling Stones. A multi-instrumentalist, a visionary, and the original face of the band, he brought blues to Britain and turned a scrappy garage act into something iconic. He became erratic, unreliable, and increasingly isolated from the very band he created. In 1969, the Stones let him go. Less than a month later, he was found dead at the bottom of his swimming pool. Cause of death, death by misadventure. A fittingly cryptic epitaph for a man who lived like a mystery. Brian Jones didn't burn out in front of stadiums. He faded quietly, tragically into water and myth. But play those early Stones records, and he's still there, ghost in the groove, haunting and brilliant. Sid Vicious, punk's prince of self-destruction. Sid Vicious didn't play bass well, some say he didn't play it at all. But what he lacked in musicianship, he made up for in mayhem. As the face of the Sex Pistols, Sid wasn't just a punk icon, he was punk's walking meltdown, sneering, staggering, bleeding charisma. Drunk more often than sober, Sid's love affair with heroin and violence was matched only by his doomed obsession with Nancy Spungen. Together they were punk's Romeo and Juliet, if Shakespeare had written with safety pins and switchblades. Their relationship spiraled into chaos. Screaming matches, hotel walls punched in blood and broken things. In 1978, Nancy was found dead, stabbed in a New York hotel room. Sid was arrested for murder, but never stood trial. Why? Because just months later, he overdosed and died. A final needle, a final fall. Age 21, Sid Vicious lived like a dare and died like a warning. But punk never wanted perfection. It wanted truth. And Sid, for all his destruction, gave it ugly, raw, and unforgettable.